Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon to join us today. And again, here we are wrapping up 2020 with our at least our 12th online version of Think About Energy. But I will tell you, I think, again, we have a great topic and a great lineup for you. So we're excited for the opportunity to hear from a wonderful panel of folks talking about some policies that are advancing in Harrisburg. So I don't really want to delay it, but I will say I do think we're blessed. It was 2 weeks ago that this Commonwealth's COVID comeback was announced at the Steamfitters, and we've got some of the folks here today that were there to really join us, to give us their insights, talk about what they announced, even in the 2 weeks time frame, what they're hearing in result, and also the reason as to why. So again, when I go backwards here, we're going to end with Jonathan Fritz, who's up in Susquehanna County. Representative Mike Reese is going to join us also from Westmoreland. Over to Josh Kail out of Beaver. But we're going to start with Jeff Nobers. I mean, Jeff, you have taken the lead with something that maybe not all of our participants are aware of, which is Pittsburgh Works Together. And I will say, I know I've been paying attention. It's impressive. And from your leadership at Pittsburgh Works Together, it really made for a nice transition into being supportive of the Commonwealth's COVID comeback. So I'm going to hand the floor to you, sir. And as Matt said, if you've got questions, get them into the chat room. I will be looking at them and making certain that we get your questions answered. Jeff, I will hand it over to you, sir.
All right, George, thanks. Just a little background on Pittsburgh Works Together. We really started the organization back in March of this year, put it together November, December of last year, and it really resulted from a couple of our energy companies, CNX and Range, especially U.S. Steel, Peoples, a few other utilities, and our construction labor unions. Just deciding that our interests weren't being represented by many of the economic development groups that purportedly were promoting the region. You would often read their background pieces or their missives, and they would talk about technology, they would talk about healthcare, they would talk about academia, robotics. Yet somehow they never mentioned energy, which of course is critical to anything that you want to do. And they didn't mention manufacturing, and they wouldn't mention the construction unions or labor generally speaking. So we just felt it was time to sort of take a stand and promote ourselves. So we launched in March, and the next day the governor shut the state down for COVID-19. So our timing was impeccable. But what it did do is it allowed us maybe to sit back a little bit and see how this played out with COVID, and make no mistake. I mean, this has been just a devastating thing to happen to our state, to our country. But out of that comes opportunities that otherwise may not have been there. And to us, a big one is this reshoring of manufacturing to our country. And beyond that, when you look at southwestern Pennsylvania specifically, which is where our primary focus is, but from the basis of the entire state, we are very well positioned and in some ways uniquely positioned to be a leader in this. And it all starts with the fact that we have abundant and inexpensive energy. And people can argue all day long about solar and wind and hydro and all these other alternative forms. But we have to deal with where we are today. And where we are today is we're in a unique position. And, as part of really launching the organization, the other thing we looked at was, okay, so we have all these assets. How do we get companies to come here? How do we get companies to stay here and expand here? Well, it's no secret, and certainly the three gentlemen with me here today, are fully well aware, Pennsylvania is not known as a friendly state to business. Between corporate tax rates regulations and policies, and we're not anti-regulation or policy. We believe many of those are important, but we have to show the business world that we want them to be here. And part of that is what can be handled legislatively. And I think the other side of it has to be handled more, I mean, quite frankly, from a marketing perspective, letting these companies know that we welcome their business, that we welcome them coming here, and to sort of change the tonality of a lot of the conversation that goes on in the state. You know, the environmental groups and the anti-business groups, who aren't all necessarily environmental groups, get the lion's share of the attention. You know, they can say whatever they want and they go unchallenged. You know, whereas if we say something, you know, it's constantly challenged, or if it's even reported in the first place. So, you know, that's where we think we can play the role. You know, we had conversations with Representative Kail, Representative Mihalik, you know, others in our state legislature, and talked to them about some of the things we thought needed to be done. And I have to, you know, give great credit to Representative Kail and Mihalik and O'Neill and you know, Leader Bennington and others, the other reps on here with us today, who all came together and took what we were saying in terms of making the state friendlier and developing this COVID comeback agenda. And we as Pittsburgh Works, you know, 100% are fully behind, you know, what they're trying to do. And there's other issues too that we think will end up being rolled into this. Josh and I were talking about one of those earlier today. So, you know, that's sort of where we got to, and we were thrilled to host this event last week and to be a part of this. And I think it's just important that we all fully support, you know, what our House leadership is trying to do in moving this state forward and ensuring that we do recover in the right way.
And Jeff, you really hit upon it, because again, it's energy. And if as you mentioned, you announced prior to COVID, but if COVID has shown us anything, it's we ought to be not doubling down, we ought to be tripling down on your efforts, because the supply chain is one of our problems. We don't have manufacturing here. And again, your members building those facilities, managing, maintaining them, working at them. We need to do more to take advantage of our footprint. Again, we talk about this often. We're the Keystone State for a reason, because we're right in the middle and it makes it easy to get product in and out. And we need to really harness that effort to do it. So again, anything else to add on your efforts? Because I will say, I mean, again, it's been truly needed and necessary as we look at coming together as a force to do good, to ensure that we have the manufacturing capabilities here.
Well, I think the other, you know, the one other point to this is, you know, when you look at the other issues we face as a country and a state, obviously, you know, in terms of, you know, race relations and, you know, the often discussed wealth gap between minorities and especially blacks and whites, you know, social issues can go a long way towards being resolved with a strong economy. And I think sometimes we try and solve a social issue, yet we have no structure by which we can solve that. If you want to close the wage gap between blacks and whites, then you have to provide an economy with opportunities that allow folks to move into these types of careers, which are not four-year degree careers necessarily. They're manufacturing, they're construction, they're in the energy industry. And that's how you close that wage gap. So by the very same groups that want these things done are oftentimes the ones that are saying, we don't want the gas industry, we don't want fracking, we don't want petrochemicals, we don't want this. So I'm not really sure how they propose to resolve some of those issues that they often address. So I think that's a subset, you know, to what we're trying to accomplish, and a benefit that can come out of what goes on with what we do on the business side of this.
Understood. And I appreciate you bringing up that subset because, again, I know education is a piece that we're going to talk about here, especially with Representative Reese and some of the efforts that he's undertaking. So, but I'm going to turn it over to Representative Kail. I mean, again, Josh, you've got a ton going on, in the General Assembly, taking on all the efforts, the shell cracker right in your backyard. You're seeing firsthand what's happening in Beaver County. Once again, all this has to be happening pre-COVID. COVID hits, and again, you're still seeing opportunities. And if I'm not mistaken, folks are knocking on your door. So walk us through what you're seeing today and what went into creating of, the Commonwealth's COVID comeback, sir.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me here. I want to just reiterate something that Jeff said, because I think it's absolutely critical to everything that we're trying to do here. And it's one of the reasons why I'm extremely supportive of the energy industry and manufacturing and construction. We want to get jobs to Pennsylvania. I want to see my kids' generation be able to stay here, and I want to see them be able to prosper here and pursue their God-given talents in Western Pennsylvania. I'm one of 7. I saw my siblings spread across the country because the opportunity wasn't here. And when we say we want jobs here, then it needs to not just be jobs, it needs to be the right kind of jobs. And it needs to be jobs that pay. And if you see the industries that provide those types of jobs, it really makes sense to be facilitating job growth in energy and manufacturing and development. I've seen it in the 15th district where I reside, which is Beaver and Washington counties. The Shell petrochemical plant is being developed there now. Before the pandemic, there was 8,500 members of unions working and building that plant. And a foreman for the steam fitters was making on average about $180,000 if you put together all their wages for the year. Rank and file members were making over 6 figures. So those types of numbers came not because they're artificially manipulated, not because the government forced a wage increase, nothing of that sort. It was because the market dictated it in those types of industries. And we have in Pennsylvania a tremendous opportunity to lead the way in those industries again. And the COVID crisis just kind of highlighted that for us. A lot of these issues that we went over were stuff that we talked about before COVID. It was deficiencies within Pennsylvania's system that we understood before COVID hit us. COVID coming, I think, has renewed a sense of urgency. We need to focus on jobs. We need the right kind of jobs coming to Pennsylvania, and we need to create an environment where companies are going to come in and invest. So about 6 months ago, or back in June, I believe it was, a group of us from southwestern Pennsylvania got together. And, this was really the time when we were doing a lot of back and forth with the governor about what industry could open, what industry couldn't open. And a group of us thought about, what's this going to look like after the COVID? What's Pennsylvania's market going to look like? We should start preparing for that. And that was really the seed for this plan. And a lot of these ideas, again, aren't stuff that are new or aren't things that you haven't heard of. For instance, we have regulatory reform, a deemed approved bill that Jonathan Fritz will talk about. It's his bill. It's just a huge deal for making things more efficient. Like Jeff said, we believe in regulations doing an oversight, but we want to make sure it's efficient for our companies. We want to make sure it's done the right way. We have tax reforms. We have incentives for manufacturers, which is my bill. It's about reshoring critical supply chain that we saw that we're too dependent on foreign nations. I think that's one of the things that's been highlighted across the country over the last 7 or 8 months. Is, it's not just a jobs issue that manufacturers have been shipped overseas, although it is. And Western Pennsylvania, in fact, most of the state of Pennsylvania has been hit dramatically over the past 40 years by manufacturers going overseas. But now we're seeing that it is indeed a national security issue. And so there's a renewed focus on reshoring those manufacturers to get them back to the United States. Pennsylvania is I firmly believe this, is very well positioned to bring those manufacturers back. We have the old brownfields. We have the natural resources. We have the natural gas, obviously. We have the workforce. And that's the type of things that we need to facilitate so that when developers and people are coming and looking, hey, where can we build these manufacturing plants? I think we got a lot to market. I think one of our major deficiencies is Harrisburg, and we need to fix those problems in Harrisburg. And that's what we're trying to do with this package of bills. Also, Representative Reese, it's a workforce development resolution and a study that he's going to lead that's critical for the future of advanced manufacturing and bringing the trades together along with our universities and technology. I think it's just absolutely essential. And the last piece I hadn't mentioned yet is a COVID liabilities bill. The last 6 or 7 months, we have seen our small businesses, big businesses, healthcare providers, whoever, really get touched up and hit hard during this crisis. We had to make sacrifices. They had to make major sacrifices. We were operating under certain assumptions, and nobody really understood completely the best way to do much of anything at the start of this. And opinions changed and standards of care changed throughout the process. It was very fluid, as they said. I don't think it makes sense that after really causing a lot of damage to our economy the last 8 months, that we let trial attorneys damage our economy for the next 20 years. I think we need a COVID liabilities bill, not people that were doing things that were willfully incorrect, but people that were just trying to figure it out, and maybe the standard of care that they were using ended up changing. And there's all kinds of technicalities we could get into from a lawyer's perspective that I won't bore you with, but that's a critical issue as well. So the basic premise of this package of bills, I think, can be summed up in this. We are trying to leverage and maximize our resources that we have in Pennsylvania while also fixing our deficiencies. And it's things that we have been talking about. It's regulatory reform, tax reform, but I think the COVID crisis has brought about a brand new, renewed focus on getting jobs here, good paying jobs that are going to be from construction and building trades, jobs where kids don't need to really get drowned in debt, and they can still make a good living. And we have the opportunity to really promote that and advance that. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, Josh, I mean, your timing couldn't be any better. Again, you know, you take what you're seeing, because if I'm not mistaken, I mean, with the shell cracker in your district, I mean, it's expected already that businesses will be looking at you, looking at your territory. Are you seeing that? How much of that might have played into, you know, the overall effort to attract the businesses here?
That's I've been seeing that since I got elected into office, and even a little bit before that, to be frank. I've talked to a number of people that were talking about buying property so that they can build manufacturing plants. And in Western Pennsylvania, out here, we're right on the border of Ohio. My district is on the border almost of Ohio. It is on the border of West Virginia. It's the thin panhandle there. And, you know, they talk to us and tell us, you know, Pennsylvania's, it's great, your guys' natural resources. We love the idea of using natural gas from the Northeast and having a manufacturing plant in the Northeast, using that natural gas, and then selling the goods in the Northeast. So everything is very vertically integrated. It's a phenomenal, you know, concept. We have so many opportunities for that. But what I hear from people is pretty uniformly, one, our tax code is a real problem, and two, that our regulatory schemes are real problems. And you know where it's not as big of a problem is Steubenville, Ohio, which is right across the border, and also in Weirton, West Virginia, which is right there. And it's the same workforce, but Pennsylvania misses out. So they love our workforce up here. I can't tell you how complimentary our shell has been about the building trades. And they were very nervous about that when they first came up. They weren't sure how this was going to really play out, and they were nervous about that type of cost, but they have been very, very pleased with the level of professionalism, the efficiency that they've seen out of our building trades. And they've been telling everybody that. I've been at different places where I've heard them say it publicly. But yes, so these ideas, it started before COVID, where I was seeing people looking for downstream opportunity, looking to build manufacturers in this northeast part of the country. And they love the idea of that we have these railroads and the rivers and the brownfield sites where, you can basically fix a site up and repurpose a site, and you have the rail there and the river there and the highway there. But the deficiencies that I just talked about with regulatory reform and tax issues are serious, and they are in fact keeping people away. And Mr. O'Brien said this the other day at the press conference. I thought it was really fascinating, is that even though we have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the country, I think we're number 2 or 3 or something as far as on the wrong side of it. Even though the effective tax rate is not nearly as high as what the actual announced tax rate is, which is like 9.9%, it doesn't matter. People see those numbers, and it's just, that's it. That's a game changer. And we got to get serious about it now. We need these jobs because we have a public fisc problem with the COVID issue. We got a $5 billion shortfall. We got to start working towards rebuilding that. And the fundamentals have changed a little bit because of the crisis that we've seen. And the sense of urgency has certainly changed. And now is the time to get very serious about making these changes. And we got a lot of positive attributes here in Pennsylvania, our workforce, our natural resources, but we got to fix these things if we really want to get these jobs here in Pennsylvania.
Well, Representative, thank you so much for that overview, because again, one of the things that you hit upon is the workforce. And again, having been to different apprentices that Jeff and the Builders Guild offer and seeing what they go through, the opportunity is there. And again, that they're putting people to work. And again, Representative Reese, I know that you're looking at trying to really identify the opportunity for workforce development. From a CABOT oil and gas standpoint, we know what we need in Northeast Pennsylvania to help us, truck drivers, welders, but it goes beyond that. It really gets into the training, the opportunities, and what we see the trades do is very impressive. So Representative Reese, I appreciate you joining us, stepping in. I didn't share this, I overlooked it. You added to our agenda when Majority Leader Benninghoff was pulled away for a conflict. So I want to thank you for stepping in for his inability to be here due to a conflict. But at the same time, you are a member of leadership. You're seeing what needs to be done, and you're pushing that resolution as well as the need to work together. So I appreciate you joining us, and I'll hand the floor to you, sir.
All right, great. Hey, thanks for that introduction, and obviously thanks for all the work you're doing. I think Jeff and Josh just did a great job kind of laying out what's going on in Pennsylvania. From a leadership perspective, we're very excited about this package of bills. We want to see family-sustaining jobs in the Commonwealth. I think we all recognize that 30, 40 years ago, we saw a movement of manufacturing jobs overseas. And if I can just be very blunt about it, through COVID-19, we've recognized there's some threats out there. And I think any good organization that sees threats should try to turn them into opportunities. And I think that's what this package of bills does. So at the end of the day, what we want to focus on is moving those jobs back home for our supply chain. We don't want to be dependent on countries that, frankly, don't really care how well we're doing in America, India and China. And we want people to have good family-sustaining jobs. So, I think everybody on this call, from a legislative perspective, we're limited government folks, right? We don't think government is the solution to every problem. But we do recognize the need for government to create an environment for success. And so that's why the package of bills is laid out the way it is. It's about making sure we're attractive for investment, but it's also capitalizing on the fact that we have some of the smartest people in the world, some of the brightest minds in the world in our universities right here in Pennsylvania. A lot of these folks are already developing some of the automated systems and some of the robotics that are being used in other countries for manufacturing. And so what a great opportunity we have here in Pennsylvania to combine those incredibly intelligent people who can design these automated systems for advanced manufacturing with arguably some of the best labor force in the entire world, some of the most talented men and women who want to show up to work and do a great job every day. And we have just an abundance of a natural resource below our feet to energize these manufacturing facilities. It's a great opportunity to bring all of these folks together and frankly move Pennsylvania forward. Appalachia is going to see a renewal in manufacturing. There's no doubt about it. Southwestern Pennsylvania is positioned to be a part of that. So my resolution, and it's a very simple, straightforward resolution, will combine the Education Committee and the Commerce Committee, a very bipartisan approach. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is a Pennsylvania issue. 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, 2 from the Education Committee on both sides, 2 from the Commerce Committee on both sides. The chairman will be selected by the Speaker of the House at the time that this resolution passes. These folks are going to be tasked with coming up with our approach to bringing these organizations together, these folks together, to advance manufacturing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So in general, George, I see you just stepped out, but that's what we are working on. And I'm honored to be a part of this team moving this package of bills forward.
So listen, I'm proud to bring forward a 45 days deemed approved piece of legislation. So I'll take you a little bit into the weeds. So DEP has 15 days to recognize an application as being administrative complete or not. Okay, so they have 15 days to determine, yes, every box has been populated, this administration, this application is ready to move forward for review and consideration. And then beyond that, you have 30 days to deem that application approved. And that speaks to the predictability and stability that industry and businesses deserve in Pennsylvania. And listen, we didn't just pluck 15 days or 30 days or 45 days out of thin air. We examined other states. And these are states that are really, they have a very noticeable environmental bent. And that is Vermont, California, and New York. Listen, if they're setting the baseline, that's something that we should certainly be able to put in the crosshairs and target. And my attitude is this: let's go to DEP with this proposal and let's talk about it. If they say, Fritz, we don't have the FTEs, we don't have the technology, we got to push that out a little bit, then I'm open to having that conversation. But again, industry needs stability and predictability. And that's what my legislation looks to accomplish. And I want to take it to a little bit more of a macro level, if you'll allow me to. Now, I proudly represent the 111th Legislative District. We have some of the most prolific, highest producing natural gas wells in the world, right here in my district. And people may think, oh, it's an industrial wasteland, I'll bet you all it is big trucks up there and dust and dirt. Listen, come on up here, please. Don't just read the newspapers that are feeding you misinformation or websites that are feeding you misinformation. Do yourself a favor and drive up here to the 111th Legislative District, and here's what you're going to find. It is pristine and beautiful and bucolic. The farms, the barns, the silos, the stone walls, the wildlife. We have some of the best hunting and fishing in the world. And the natural gas industry has actually helped to support that. Listen, I ran for mayor when I was 27, and won, by the way. But the primary theme in my election was I wanted to reverse brain drain. It's a very real problem for Pennsylvania as a whole. I think Josh mentioned it, but especially in my area. All the bright minds were leaving, going elsewhere. And I very actively wanted to reverse that. So one thing that I could do was bring some culture. We have a downtown district right here. I'm overlooking my main street. We've got 2 wineries, 2 breweries. We've got all kinds of awesome restaurants and bars. It's full of life. But I'm telling you, what is feeding those businesses and what's bringing that viability back is jobs. And that has been exactly what natural gas has done for our area. You cruise around the 111th and you see all the preserved farms with a brand new roof on the barn, brand new 3/4 ton truck sitting in the driveway. Listen, I used to sell farm machinery, so I'm always noticing the hay balers and the tractors, brand new tractors and machinery. It has breathed critical new life into my region. But there's been an impediment and a series of impediments. We have this godsend, this wonderful industry, this natural resource underfoot. Well, what is holding us up from realizing our potential? A big part of it is regulation. Instead of rolling out the red carpet, like West Virginia or Ohio, we bust out the red tape. It's not how can I facilitate, it's how can I impede. All right, listen, that's a culture, that's a mindset that we are very actively working against. And listen, it's easy to criticize, but it begs the question, what can we do to help remedy that situation? And this speaks to Reese's bill. We need to build a pipeline, no pun intended, of young folks with an environmental science interest, whether it be through grade school and high school and obviously college, but we need them to come out with a tempered view of industry, because I'm telling you right now, the folks that are in decision-making positions, and not all of them, it's not across the board, all right? I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, but a lot of our folks at our permit reviewing agencies have an environmental bent that is not friendly towards industry. They do not believe that environmental stewardship and industry are mutually exclusive, or they're not mutually exclusive, rather. And it's very, very critical that we bring about that change in mindset, that change in culture. And George, I'll speak to you because I see that you are so actively engaged in your community in educating young minds and exposing all the benefits to schools and different community leaders in our region and our area. And I thank you for that. But I really want to see CABOT and the industry as a whole lead the way in bringing about this pipeline of minds and bright minds where they can have a position in permit reviewing agencies. And listen, the industry's been around in my region long enough now for 10+ years, where these young minds can come from households that have benefited from the industry. It's part of the landscape. It's part of their way of life. They know that that's what's putting a roof over their head and food on their table. So it's critical. In the meantime, however, we have a certain cast of characters and a certain reality that we have to work within. So we're not going to see sweeping changes anytime soon, but what we can do is we can introduce, I like to call them ratchets. And my piece of legislation is a ratchet. It introduces a new standard for permit review and acceptance. And that's what our industry needs. I'm proud to partner with these guys. Listen, we're not in the house just taking issue with the governor and shutting down the businesses. No, we wanted to bring forward our own answer and our own policy introduction, which is this group of bills. And I got a great team around me. Thank you, George. I'll leave it there.
Well, Jonathan, there's no doubt you have a great team around you. And again, I appreciate the passion that you bring. We see it in Representative Reese. We see it out of Jeff. And we saw it on display on the event on October 14th. I mean, Josh did a heck of a job pulling everybody together to get to there. I'm sort of curious. I'm going to throw this over to Jeff in the sense of, here we are 2 weeks after the 14th. What are you hearing from your labor partners, whether they be in Northeast Pennsylvania or in Philadelphia? I mean, is this raising the bar on Pittsburgh Works Together and what we can be doing statewide?
Clearly it has. I mean, obviously communication with the other labor unions and with our construction unions is pretty open. And, we were very supportive of, I believe it was 1,100 that affected the petro plants in the Northeast with that tax incentive. And, that was done because the labor unions in the eastern part of the state called us and, ask our guys to, call the lawmakers and the legislators they know and really push that issue forward. And they, gladly did it. I think the one thing, we're called Pittsburgh Works, and, when we started, our focus was southwestern PA. That's where we all are. But clearly these are statewide issues. I mean, the things we're talking about don't just impact southwestern Pennsylvania. The other day we got a call from Representative Phil English, former representative, and he wants us to come up and meet with people in Erie to explain to them how we did this, and they want to do Erie Works. There's another market that has a lot of the same issues that we have. So, I think traction has been there, but to me, the biggest thing is that you hear from some folks that aren't necessarily fully on board with some of the things we talk about. And I'm not going to name names or political affiliations, but, the bottom line is, these are necessities. This has to be done. I've lived in Pennsylvania my whole life. I've never left here by design. Been fortunate not to have to. And I do love the state and I love the area, but we really need to, quite frankly, get our act together, because if we don't do this, there's 49 other states that will. And, I think another point we try and make is, where would you prefer that this energy come from? Where would you prefer the plastic feedstocks are manufactured? Where would you prefer we manufacture things? In China, where there's absolutely no regulation, at a time when we're shutting down coal-powered power plants, China and India are building like 50 of them, and they will pollute as much or more so than any of the plants we're shutting down. So, I think we really have to start to look at this full scope of things, and it's not going to be easy, necessarily pull some on the, opposing viewpoint of this to understand that, there is a place for everything. And you're not going to have an economy that functions based on one or two industries. I mean, hey, Josh is much younger than I, but, I remember when the steel industry just, in seemingly a week, disappeared. The number of kids I went to high school with that I saw moving, because their families, their fathers lost their jobs. We did research prior to launching, and this is all pre-pandemic. And we asked people, do you think jobs should be sacrificed for the sake of, incremental environmental improvement? And they absolutely said no, they should not. They also said, hey, we think you still got to deal with the environment. We don't want to backslide to where we were. We want to continue to improve it. And this was even younger people in their 20s, would talk about what happened in the 80s here like they lived through it. And I think one guy, he made a great point. There's a reason there's Steeler bars all across this country. And it's not because they're just Steeler fans. It's because they're from here and they had to leave. And we really need to, work. I mean, we do need to work together on this. I think as we all concur, this is going to take bipartisan support. It's going to take, quite frankly, some people making decisions that go against, some of their grain and some of their gut, and not make decisions that are based on what a very small minority of people believe, but what's beneficial to our state as a whole. So, I think we've made some inroads there. I mean, when people start to come after you, you're touching a nerve. So, if everybody's just telling you, hey, that's great, that's not necessarily what you want to hear. It's when they take shots at you that you figure you're making some progress in what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you're over the target when you're getting flack, and that's the point. And I'm just curious, Josh, not so much flack, but I'm curious as to what you're hearing from, folks that weren't involved on the event on the 14th. I mean, it's clear that, we see this as a bipartisan effort. It needs to make certain that Pennsylvania moves forward. So you did a wonderful job. You got folks all on the different bills that represent the Commonwealth. What are you hearing from folks that weren't at the event on the 14th, and how's that feedback been going for yourself?
It's been going well. I mean, everybody is on board with good paying jobs, right? I mean, you're not going to have many people disagree with that. I know Representative Reese noted this at the actual event, and I can confirm it just with my conversations with colleagues from the other side of the aisle since the event. There is excitement coming from that side of the aisle as well about moving the Commonwealth forward. There's going to be issues for both sides that they may not, it may not be ideal, but everyone's recognizing that this is a package that's going to move us forward to a place where we need to go. And I think it's absolutely, people are getting excited. I think you're going to see bipartisan support. And it's going to be front and center as we go forward into next session. I do want to say one other thing, just commenting on what Jeff said. He made a great point about the pollution that we're seeing in China and India and the development that we're seeing there. And I think it really relates to bringing our manufacturing jobs here. I think there is a very, very strong environmental argument for having our manufacturing done in the United States, and I would argue in Pennsylvania. And I told this to Penn, what's the Penn Future? That's the one that no one's out there boycotting plastic, right? No one's out there saying, they don't want their cell phones anymore, or they don't want the plexiglass that's going to be used to separate people at restaurants, right? Like, no one's out there saying realistically that we can live without fossil fuels. I mean, people are saying it in a general sense, but if you really nail it down, it's not realistic. But one of the advantages that we have in Pennsylvania is that we do have Penn Future, that we do have someone that's going to be looking at it. There is going to be some level of oversight independent of government agencies. And I told this to Penn Future. I said, I don't think there's any China future. My guess is they'd be 6 feet under if they tried. So, I mean, it's something where it's actually a win-win situation for us. And the last time I checked, we all live in the same world. And so you want to talk about global macro issues, it all affects us. So let's do it here where we can watch it here and we can enjoy the jobs here. The false dichotomy that's been created that it's either environment or jobs is garbage. It's complete garbage, and it's something that the energy industry has shown to be garbage, and we can do it too with the manufacturing industry as we bring it back to the United States.
And transitioning from what you're hearing from others and the fact that you're talking to the Penn Futures and others like that to engage them in conversation. Representative Reese, I was going to turn to you. There's a question here regarding the idea. Again, it's just been 2 weeks and we have an election going on and a pandemic, but folks are just curious in the sense of, whether it's leadership to leadership or from education to commerce. What can people do to help drive that notion that you're going after under the resolution that we have to come together as a workforce and employers for the best of the students for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. So look, I mean, if folks are asking how best to communicate with the General Assembly on this issue, I would say number one, start by contacting your local representative, and frankly also talk to your local senator. That's probably the most effective way to help us move this issue forward, particularly with the resolution. So that's my take on that. I also want to add in because look, I think the timing on this is really good from an education perspective. A lot of our state-related schools, Pitt, Penn State, Lincoln, and Temple, do a phenomenal job with some of this research and some of the robotics. Our private schools also do a great job. And our state schools are very strong, but a lot of them are retooling. They're looking at, what does our future look like in the PASHE system? There's some discussion that maybe we don't need all these state schools. I think some of them are looking for opportunities to address the needs of the Commonwealth and maybe change their mission a little bit to meet the needs of our business community. So the timing on this is really, really good. And also, I got to tell you, with the steam fitters and Kenny Broadband up there, and when we did this event a couple of weeks ago, what a great place to educate our workforce for the future. Our trades guys have these great facilities that are ready to go and ready to move us forward. So just wanted to add that.
I can't agree with you anymore on that piece. I mean, whether it's Pittsburgh or, to your point, in Harmony, up in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, when you go to the training facilities, they've got the best equipment, they've got the best opportunities. And one of the questions had to do with, from your standpoint, yes, we could talk to members of the General Assembly, but what about school boards? Is there too much emphasis on, oh no, you got to go to a 4-degree college?
Yeah.
What about the trades and 2-year degrees and going straight into work? Is there anything that you, Representative Reese, see that could be assisting your efforts there?
Yeah, so let's be clear. What's happening in that world is frankly coming from the fact that folks see these young people coming out of college with degrees that might have a potential salary of $35,000 to $40,000 a year, and they have $180,000 to $200,000 in debt. I'm a prime example of that. I came up in the generation of, you got to go to college, you have to go to college, you don't have a chance unless you get a degree. Now I'm looking at my 3 kids saying, maybe, what do you want to study, right? We don't want you just to go to school and study something that frankly isn't going to provide a family sustaining job at the end of the day. So I think, more people are getting familiar with the trades. You can make a very, very good living as an electrician. You can make a very, very good living as a plumber. And if you look 10, 15 years down the road, we are going to be in desperate need for folks that have those skills. So, I think our school counselors are slowly getting on board with that. For a long time, they just wanted to talk about advancing their students from their high school to a higher education institution. And look, we're not saying that, you can leave high school and be ready to go and work in a trade and make tons of money. That's not how it works. There's an education component to it. With our trades, most of them have a 5-year journeyman program that they go to school while they're working. So, and they go to school for free, which is just amazing. And they're developing all these skills on someone else's dollar, right? And ultimately putting themselves in the workforce, making a really good living. So I think, our conversations with school counselors, our conversation with school board members is, hey, look, you want to provide a really good K through 12 education. Be good at what you do. But the reality is not every kid has to go to a 4-year college.
I appreciate that, and we're seeing that head on, you know what I mean? And again, we are fortunate to operate up in Susquehanna County with Representative Fritz there, and again, some of the wells that we have are there. But Representative, the question has come in, from the standpoint of deemed approved. The overall question is, have you seen the Department of Environmental Protection be helpful, be hurtful, and what can you do just to say, get on our team to help promote manufacturing, to help promote pipelines?
Is that
Thank you,
a
George,
question
for
for you,
the
George, or
opportunity.
Fritz?
I'm sorry, that was for Jonathan Fritz. I apologize.
All good, all good. Thank you, George. So, listen, I'm sitting here and I physically felt my blood pressure go up when Kail mentioned Penn Future. Okay. So we had an Environmental Resource and Energy Committee meeting last year where Penn Future had an individual there providing testimony, and he likened those of us. Now this is serious. He likened those of us that advocate and promote the use of fossil fuels to what happened at Sandy Hook. Oh my goodness. There is no excuse for a reference like that. Just an egregious and entirely unacceptable analogy and response. And here's what I want to talk about. We are dealing with people on the other side of this that are not reasonable. They're not logical. And I'm sorry, I can't have a conversation and I can't reason or negotiate with somebody that is completely untethered from reality and logic. It's a very serious issue. And that is the very mindset that unfortunately has leaked its way into our state agency. They are oppositional to fossil fuel and responsible industry. So here's one thing that I will mention is that DEP, at least some of the folks that are counting beans at DEP, realize how important the industry is to the financial health of their agency. Okay? And they realize that we need to have this industry if they want to continue to provide jobs and have a pension. So that's the angle that we can use to our advantage, if you will, is how critically important this industry is. And for all the people that are on this call, I just please implore you that if you have a family member or a coworker or a neighbor, whatever, anybody in your social dynamic, your social circle that comes from a place of emotion when it comes to industry and the environment, that you have that conversation with them. Talk them off the ledge. Friends, when I hit a light switch, I really like that my lights come on. I like that it lights up a room. We cannot live in a world without fossil fuel. And for anybody that wants to interpret what I'm saying as being adversarial to wind or solar, I'm not. I'm an investor, I'm a finance guy. And if you have a portfolio of stocks, it needs to be diversified. I need small caps, I need industrials, I need utilities. It's the same philosophy and same approach when it comes to energy. I need an all the above approach. I need responsible use of fossil fuels. I need the wind, I need the solar, and I'm not going to tether myself to just one or the other. It needs to be all the above. That's the logical conversation that I advocate and I want to put out there. And I wish the folks on the other side would at least meet me halfway. I'll leave it there.
Well, we hope that these are opportunities to get those views out there, Jonathan. And again, trying to break down barriers, educate people, show them what's happening. I know there's, again, a lot, you know, the chat's full of questions and we're not going to go there, Jeff. We're not going to put you on the spot because there's so many questions about how Pittsburgh works together, can actually operate with the Peduto administration. I appreciate the questions coming in, but I think that's a conversation for another day because truly at the end of it, and we're getting to the end of our hour here, you know, it's the opportunity to be bipartisan, to look for chances to bring a manufacturing base back. Again, the efforts were drawn pre-pandemic, but all that I have seen is the pandemic is demonstrating that we need to be prepared for the future. I understand we're not through it yet, but I love the fact
I think we're experiencing a little technical difficulty there from George. So I don't know if you guys have any last words here as we kind of wrap things up here. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, this is also why we need to
discuss broadband there.
I was just going to say, this is why we need to promote broadband. That's funny. I just wanted to say one thing, or go ahead, Jeff. Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Josh.
Because I think it matches with what Representative Fritz was saying very well. I think it's important to note that once you get beyond the initial, the stakeholders on the other side of these issues and actually talk to people, even people engaged with them. When I had a conversation with Penn Future, I mentioned all the positive environmental impacts that Shell coming here had, and they were real. And there was a zinc plant where Shell was, and they tried planting thousands of pine trees right beside this zinc plant, and all the pine trees died. The whole thing, the project totally failed because of the pollution that was coming from this smelter plant. And as I was saying that story, explaining the Penn future, like this is why, you know, we should do this so we can clean these old sites and we can stop pollution and we can do things right here. The individual who is from my district that's also a member of Penn Future was like, yeah, I remember that because I was on the crew that planted the pine trees. And he was like, you're right. Like it makes sense because people on the ground actually dealing with the consequences of what we're talking about. It makes sense. It's common sense, it's logical, and it's creating wins across the board. And I know today it's hard to imagine where both sides can win, and it's not just a one side win, the other side loses, but this is one of those instances where it really does create situations where we're winning, and the whole state's winning, and the Commonwealth is going to win because we're pushing forward this type of agenda.
Well, and I think, Josh, to that point, I mean, it's, I had a recent conversation with a couple of reporters that are environmentalists, and they noted to me, you know, plastics and how bad plastics are. And the example they used was, you know, you drive down the road and you see plastic soda bottles laying on the side of the road. And my response to that was, well, who threw those bottles there? It wasn't Shell. It wasn't the gas industry. It wasn't the companies that manufactured the bottles. It was you and me. And it's the people that use them. It's the end user. So your beef really should be with all of us that use these products and not with those that manufacture it. And beyond that, you know, plastics get equated to those very simple things, a bottle, a consumer packaged good. Plastics are in virtually everything we use every day. And if you eliminated plastics, you're going to eliminate cell phones, vehicles, clothing, pharmaceuticals, you know, the important medical equipment you need. So it's really in many respects, a nonsense argument. And I would just say that some of the groups, and I agree with what Representative Fritz said, you know, let's face it, they're well funded by foundations. And these foundations, in some cases, have a very specific agenda. And this is their full-time job. You know, we all work for a living. You know, I don't have time to go protesting at the city county building every day. And that's sort of what we're up against. But I do think, you know, to your point, Josh, there are some who understand it better and get it. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for common ground. It's not who wins. You know, we all win if we can find the common ground.
I'm gonna. It sounds like I may not be back.
You're back.
I appreciate the broadband comments. Feeling it. I don't want to push my luck here. I want to thank you all for joining in. We have reached the 1 o'clock hour. I appreciate each of you sharing the insights. I know that we will do as a group everything we can to help promote this piece of this package of legislation. So Representative Reese will take you up. You'll hear from us. Josh, we will be hearing likewise on efforts that you're doing. Jeff, we are going to stay connected on this, and there's no doubt in Susquehanna County, Mr. Fritz, we will be with you. To really bring this session to an end, I also want to thank those that are also continuing the education. If you're not familiar with Shale Energy Alliance, get familiar. They're doing great work. They were a big proponent of today's event, helped us get the word out to folks. I see Josh shaking his head that folks are aware of what's going on over there. I also know that Shale Crescent is going to be sending out some information through us regarding manufacturing in the Ohio River, because what you heard when Josh mentioned Beaver or Weirton or Steubenville, they're all connected by the Ohio River. So the opportunity to traverse is right there. And that's why we have to pay attention to what our neighbors are doing, because we'll all benefit as a region if we can move accordingly. I also want to throw a shout out to Matt Henderson and Natalie. I know they are working on a survey to make these Think About Energy's better. Yes, we'll work on the broadband likewise. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, you got to vote. We're 1 week out. And this is not, again, a partisan situation. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, except for vote for the candidate that's pro-energy. Do me a favor. Don't just take one person with you to the polls. Take 3. We need to ensure that your voice is heard. It is a big election. You hear it all the time. But again, you need a plan. You need to take the responsibility. You've taken the time to join us for an hour today. Think about that next week opportunity that you have. Make that plan, get out there, vote, and please share that information with others. With that, Matt, I'll hand it to you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, George. And as mentioned, we will send a link out to share the resource that our friends at Shell Crescent is putting out, and we'll have a recording of this link come out here in a few days. So look for your emails for the survey as well as a follow-up to this. And on behalf of Think About Energy, thank you to CABOT, and thank you for everyone for being here today. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well.